Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in a very stormy Midlothian region of Scotland. That said, kind of gone a little bit quiet out there, suspiciously quiet, actually, as it goes. It's been pretty torrential downpour for the last couple of hours, and we've had lightning, we've had thunder. So we're kind of battling against that at the moment, but like I said, it's kind of like suddenly the rain is just like almost as if by magic has just gone, okay, Songwriting Simplified is on, let's stop and tune in. So I'm hoping that that is kind of it for at least a wee while. Yes, when it goes quiet, it means you're in the eye of the storm. Yes, absolutely it does. Yeah, for sure. So hopefully we'll be in the eye of this little storm, this little supercell for hopefully an hour, and then it can do what the hell it likes after that. I really don't mind. I'd just like to get through an entire show, if at all possible. Without, the threat of the power going off or something like that. All right, so let's go see who's here tonight. Billy Morgan has restored his #1 spot. Being first in the door at 7:30 UK time. 2 minutes later, Ron Figura came in, and John Hawke is here, and Tony Stringer is here. Stephen Wilson is here as well. Cal Traduziak, Neil Thompson is here. Matt Cochran, Don Oliver are all here. And Just Bob as well. Bobby Booth is here, which means we can start. Paul Morgan is here. And Brett Marla is here as well. And I think that's everybody so far. Dwayne has just walked in the door. He has a very interesting question, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. Let's see. I'm just going to give my emails a very quick check. Because I know I did kind of say that people could email me ahead of showtime if they got like a much more detailed question. Let's go see. Do we have anything there? No, we don't. We don't. And that's okay. I don't mind. All right, so let's get back to the chat then. And I can see that Just Bob has a really, really good question, actually. And he says, what, in your opinion, is the best way to start a song to grab the attention of the listener? And then what needs to be done to keep them listening? Great question. Because all of those, every single one of those is an arranging question. I love writing arrangements. I do a lot of arrangements for a lot of people and have done over the last 25 years or so. So some of those arrangements have been much more traditional. I get hired to write horn arrangements, string arrangements, vocal arrangements, but sometimes I also get to write the arrangements for a whole band for their record. And so I've done a few of those, and basically it depends upon what I get. Sometimes I get like a fully written out, fully realized song, with lyrics, with melody, with chord changes, with a complete idea of the form of the song. And then sometimes all I have really is just a few chord changes and a sketched out 8-bar melody, and that's largely what gets brought to the session, and then it gets kind of worked out organically from there by the band members. And I don't mind working with either. Sometimes actually it's, a bit more of a challenge when somebody just has a sketched out idea on, a piece of notepad paper, and, as a band and with me as the arranger, we kind of go from there. And develop the whole thing organically. That's quite a cool way of working. So the heart of the question here is, how do we grab the listener's attention? Basically, the psychology is you've got about 6 seconds at the very most, the most generous. You've got about 6 seconds to grab the attention of your listener before they think about skipping on to the next song on whatever streaming platform they're listening to your song on. And so you need, just like any good salesperson, you need to have not only a good sales pitch, but a good sales pitch that starts with a catch line, a tagline that basically summarizes everything about your song without giving the game away, because you want to keep the listener hooked in for what's going to come later in the song. So this is where the intro is incredibly important, because this is the moment where you sell your song to the listener. There are different methods you can employ to do this, and there are lots of different arranging techniques that you can employ to make this happen. The one that I use the most is where I basically take fragments of melody that is already written later on in the song, and I preview it, a little bit like a prologue for a film. So it's a similar kind of approach. The prologue for the film basically sets the scene. If you've ever watched a James Bond film, before you get the title credits at the start of the film, the main titles of the film, you get a prologue that's maybe about 7 or 8 minutes long. And that kind of sets up for what is going to come in the meat of the film. So you are introduced to a bunch of characters very quickly, and a scenario. You're just kind of thrown into it, and you kind of like you're kind of going, whoa, what's going on here? There's explosions. There's Bond he's been rumbled. His cover has been breached, and he's having to get on the move, and he's having to escape very quickly. So it's high drama, high intensity drama from the start before you get to the titles. And it's an interesting technique. The whole idea of the prologue is actually born out of a novel writing style that probably dates from maybe the end of the 19th century. And so you can employ that technique with songwriting, and actually a lot of great songwriters throughout history have done that. A lot of the Tin Pan Alley songs, they have something called a refrain. And I think we've talked about this before. We may have talked about this last year, actually. So there's this thing called a refrain, and you'll hear this in a lot of popular songs from the 1930s and 1940s that we now consider what we would call standards. So songs like let me think. I Got Rhythm, or Funny Valentine by Rodgers and Hammerstein. Funny Valentine in particular is a unique one, and the reason why it's unique is because it starts with this refrain, and the refrain basically sets the scene for the familiar song that we all know and love. Because most people, when they perform an arrangement of Funny Valentine, they never play the refrain part. And so most modern listeners, when they hear Funny Valentine, this is what they hear. That's where the tune starts, or so a lot of modern listeners think, but it isn't. There's a whole refrain section that's maybe about 25 seconds long that comes before it. And then you get into the My Funny Valentine, Sweet Comic Valentine part, which is the part that we're all familiar with, which is the main AABA song form of Funny Valentine. So you can start with a refrain, although refrains these days, they're not really a thing. They have definitely fallen out of fashion, but it is something I would love to see brought back. So the modern equivalent is the intro. And so what does your intro need to consist of? It can be really short. It can be a case of just one chord. that kind of sets things up. Like, for example, Steely Dan's Don't Take Me Alive. You have that E7 sharp 9 chord played by Larry Carlton that just kind of hangs there. Each note is kind of spelled out, and then it just kind of hangs there for a moment, and the guitar begins to feed back a little bit, and then you get into the main groove of the song, and the main groove of the song is the chorus, with Larry Carlton basically improvising on the changes of the chorus. And then you get into a little kind of chilled out 4-bar vamp, and then you get into verse 1. So it's a decently long intro. And so what am I getting at here? I'm getting at how to build an intro. Like I said, you can make it really short. It could just be a simple drum fill and then you're straight in. And there are plenty of songs that do that. Or you can basically preview the chorus, which is what Becker and Fagan did with Don't Take Me Alive. But without ever stating the melody. Although, if you listen to that intro carefully, you can hear it in the keyboard part, in the Fender Rhodes part, being hinted at. Especially in the first kind of 8 bars of the chorus, you can hear the melody being hinted at. Why is that? Well, it's because the melody to the chorus is derived from the keyboard part in the first place. So it's kind of stated implicitly inside the keyboard part. And so this is what I tend to do with my songs, is I tend to use the chorus as my intro, and I will basically take maybe half a phrase of one line of the chorus and then half a phrase of another line in the chorus, and I will basically join these two together, and then that's going to be my intro. And I'm not going to explicitly state the melody, I'm going to kind of play it in an understated way. And that's kind of what I usually do. Why do I do this? Because the chorus is the punchline of your song. That's basically it's the I'm trying to find another, it's the money shot, basically. It's the money shot. That's what your chorus is. The punchline, it's the money shot, it's the summation of everything in your song. It's kind of the peak of your song. And so your intro needs to have elements of that, because you want to set your listener up for going, hey, that's an interesting little melody. Hey, that's a cool little lick. And then what you want to do is get your listener hooked onto that, and so that they then continue to listen until they get to the chorus. And then, of course, you're going to hit them with the full chorus, the fully stated chorus, with a melody that they already kind of know, because they've already kind of heard it previewed at the start. And that's kind of what the prologue thing is all about that you see in a James Bond film. That's what the refrain is all about. In a much older 1930s music hall style song, is that the idea is it sets the scene and develops the atmosphere and the mood and the characters and the personality of the song before launching into the song itself, which, by the way, is in itself a derivative of medieval recitative style, which is where in a madrigal, again another style, and you can Google all of these terms, by the way. Madrigal is a song form in and of itself, but it is often preceded by a recitative. What does that do? That sets the scene for the madrigal, which is the main song that either pokes fun at the characters in a performance, or it describes the performance, the characters in a performance. And then the recitative basically sets you up for that. It talks about who this person is, why this person is so great, why this person is so powerful, or why this person is so stupid and so powerful. As was the bent for medieval kind of music hall kind of style, or not quite music hall, but you get the idea. And so you can trace that all the way from like the 13th, 14th century all the way through to the 21st century. So a good, solid intro is what you're after, that uses elements that are going to come up later in your song. And by the way, it's a good idea to basically drop some breadcrumbs throughout your verse as you lead towards your chorus of what is going to come, elements that are going to come in the chorus. So it might be a little, horn section motif that you've got in your chorus that's really, really great, and you want to kind of set the listener's ears up for that. So this is how the second part of your question goes, Bob. You want to keep your listener engaged by giving them ear candy. And I don't just mean something that's pretty, like a nice reverb tail or a nice delay or a little bit of, ping-ponging or panning effects that takes something from one side to the other, which, by the way, does keep the listener engaged. But you want to keep them engaged by dropping little hints at what's coming up later in the song. I mean, it's what TV show producers do all the time. It's what keeps you watching even though they're going to a commercial break. Because you tell them, hey, this is coming up next. Stay with us. This is coming up next. And so you therefore feel compelled to watch now because you want to find out what that thing is that's been hinted at. So you sit through the commercials. And then the next part of your TV show comes on and you get what is delivered. So use those kind of concepts, those kind of ideas in your songwriting to keep your listener engaged all the way through. So keep setting them up by saying, hey, coming up next is this. Coming up next is this. This is going to be very cool. Or we're building towards this really, really, really great guitar solo. And you're setting them up. You're setting them up. You're setting them up. And you lead them like a fish into a fish basket straight for this guitar solo because it's going to be freaking awesome. And then, you go into that last chorus or that last double chorus. And again, you're setting them up again with your lead guitar player, your solo guitar player, kind of still doing a little bit of improv throughout the last chorus. And then they're off again into another extended solo section, and then you fade the song out. Why do we fade the song out? We fade the song out because we want them literally straining their ears for more. And of course, that's where you tell your guitar player, really let your hair down, really let your chops loose, really go for it. Be adventurous, be harmonically adventurous, and, do something that is a little bit kind of out there in that ending guitar solo. So do you see what I'm talking about? How you build your song all the way through, and you're constantly dropping breadcrumbs throughout the course of the song to keep the listener going, to keep the listener engaged. And then hopefully by the end of it, they've had such a great experience of listening to that song. They're just like, wow, I've got to listen to that again because it was really, really good. I've got to listen to that again. And so they do. And once you've got them listening a second time, they are, I tell you this right now, I guarantee it, practically guarantee it, they will buy your song. If you're selling your song, they will buy it. If you're giving it away for free, they will download it. And then they will tell their friends about that experience they had with your song. So, long answer, but I thought I should kind of flesh out the whole process psychologically of how you're going to win your listener to your material and keep them there. Because once you've got them past those first 30 seconds, you've pretty much got them and you're not going to lose them unless you really screw it up. But you're pretty much not going to lose them once you've got them listening for more than 30 seconds, especially young people today. If you've got them listening for more than 30 seconds, they are sold. Okay, part 2 of Bob's question. What kind of effects can be used to accent, let's say, a guitar strum or synth keyboard chord progression opening. Are there any studied sounds, things like flange and chorus? Yeah, it depends upon the style of the music that you're working in. For example, let's say, I'm not saying this is your thing, Bob, but let's say you're working in, your song is a one-drop reggae song. So kind of that Bob Marley vibe where it's a crossover between a little bit of pop, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of one-drop reggae, but very clearly Jamaican. But here's the thing, there are some traditional effects that he used that make you that make the listener know, yes, this is 100% one drop reggae. Other than the drum part, which has got the kick drum beat on beat 3. And usually with the cross stick on the snare drum as well at the same time. And that's the drop, by the way. And that's why they call it one drop, because you get one of those in a 4/4 bar, right? So other than that, there are key ingredients that you can use effects-wise, particularly on a guitar. Yes, you can use some chorus. Yes, you can use maybe a little bit of flange as well. A delay. A slap back delay is definitely a winning sound, especially if you are not using very much reverb. Maybe make that guitar part really, really bone dry, but with that slapback delay. Or maybe with just the merest hair of a reverb, just to give it a little bit of ambience that's felt rather than heard. But that kind of, the up strum of the guitar, because you don't strum down on the guitar in reggae, you up strum. So, why do they do that? Because they want to get the high notes of the chord played first before you get to the low notes of the chord. And that's a stylistic thing. That's kind of intrinsic to that reggae sound. So, jink, jink, jink. So if you give that a little slap back delay, that gives that guitar a little bit of presence, gives a little bit of forward motion, and it's also exactly stylistically correct for the one drop reggae, especially if it's got some chorus on it as well. And then, things like Hammond organ. Got to have the Leslie on a Hammond organ. And there are specific drawbar settings for a Hammond organ that you need to use in that style of music. I'm just picking this style of music just because it's what came into my head. Fender Rhodes, got to have Fender Rhodes. And the Fender Rhodes has got to go through a phase 90. Believe it or not, that guitar pedal, the phase 90 guitar pedal, the Fender Rhodes has to go through that. And it may well be doubling the guitar part. So you may well have the guitar with its slapback delay and then the Fender Rhodes through the phaser on the other side. And they may well be both playing at the same time, playing the same rhythm, but not necessarily the same voicings of those chords. So those are kind of key ingredients: bit of flange, bit of chorus, some slapback delay, and of course, slapback delay on the snare drum. Got to have a wee bit of that as well. So, so some of those are really, really cool as well. And of course, then you can add into that modern production techniques. I mean, maybe the genre you're working is not one drop reggae, but, for example, a reversed piano. I know Joe Gilder has talked about this a lot. He actually uses this. To my mind, he maybe uses it a little too much, but it's kind of a thing for him, and it kind of is a little bit of a signature thing for him. So, he kind of gets away with it. But he takes just an octave sound on the piano like that, and he'll play that, and then he'll reverse that with a reversed reverb as well. So you basically get like that. And so you could use that as an intro. You could use that in going into a chorus. There's lots of different things you could do with that. But yes, Bob, terrific 2-part question. Love it. Let's see. Brett Mallard says the Star Wars opening crawl is basically a prologue. Well, it kind of is, yes, in text form. And actually, it was a relatively unique way round of doing that. Actually, the the film studio that were making the Star Wars, they didn't really like the crawl idea, and so that's one of the reasons why Star Wars actually became a bit more of an independent film. Because, you know, the studio basically said, no, we don't like this crawl idea of text. Nobody's going to want to sit and read text. Are you kidding me? And Lucas basically said, that's what I'm doing. And so he went independent just so that he could do the crawl. Brett says, so you're saying that we shouldn't refrain from the use of refrains? Correct. Absolutely. Neil Thompson says, I like to use instrumental stops, meaning the listener is expecting drums, etc. to carry on as usual, but instead everything stops for one or two vocal lines. Yes, that's another good thing, particularly in a chorus, doing what they call a drop chorus, where basically you thin out your arrangement to maybe just a very dry vocal with an acoustic guitar. So basically everything has gone from being big to being very intimate for like the first two lines of your last chorus. And then everything comes back in and the mix goes from being mono to being full out wide again. That's another good little arranging technique. Again, I can point to songwriters who actually just do that all the time, just because for some reason they believe that it's just something you should just do, that it's just something that is kind of it. And so it unfortunately becomes a little bit formulaic. So that's another point to this whole arranging thing. Whilst it's good to know the formulas and know how things work, like AABA song form, for example, if you don't know the AABA song form, then writing anything else, writing something that sounds, not only sounds good, but sounds authentic is going to be really hard. It's like, you know, the way you first learn to strip an engine of a car. The first few times you do it by the book. Why? Because you have to learn the right way to do it. You have to learn the right way to do it. And then once you are very familiar with the right way of doing it, then you start to personalize how you do it. And eventually you have your own little methodology that you employ. And that's how you develop your own sound, by the way. And so it is with improvisation. The best way to learn how to improvise is to listen to great improvisers and take some of their phrases. Literally learn some of their phrases, copy them, master them, adopt them into your playing, and then once you've done that, you can start to make those phrases yours, so that instead of just being somebody else's lick, like a Charlie Parker or a John Coltrane lick, you make them yours. So now it becomes a Lipsham lick and not a train lick or a bird lick. It's a Lipsham lick. But it started with something I heard Charlie Parker do. And I decided to copy it. I decided to transcribe it, work it out, see what chord types it works on, and then learn that obsessively in all 12 keys, master it so that it sounds natural, and then I make it my own. I start introducing my own little variations on the phrase until it's nothing like Bird's anymore. It's mine. It sounds like me. It doesn't sound like Bird, but it has its origins there. And so it is with learning how to write a great song, learning how to write a great arrangement. Listen to great arrangers. Write down what they do. Listen to a great song. Listen to how all the key ingredients of a song are used and then go and do the same. Literally lift a song arrangement and adopt it to your song. And make your song do exactly what that great arranger's song does, until you can master the idea, until you can master the concept. And then when it's totally natural, then you can start developing that concept and making it your own. Arrangers do that all the time. I mean, you listen to Glenn Miller. Listen to early Glenn Miller arrangements. the early Glenn Miller arrangements from like 1939, 1940. They're all right. They're not great. They sound pretty standard for big band, you know. You have a little bit of melody in the trumpets, backed by counter melody in the saxophones, with the trombones not doing anything at all. And then the trombones take the melody. The saxophones, you know, they've now gone into the backing band, you know, the backing role. And then the melody jumps again. So now the saxophones have the melody, and the brass together, trombones and trumpets, are responding. Maybe you've got block chords in the trombones, and you've got answering phrases to the main melody in the saxophones in the trumpets. And that's standard fare. That's exactly how you write a big band chart, right? And so that's what early Glenn Miller arrangements sound like. They sound like Harry James's arrangements. They sound like anybody else's arrangements. But what makes Miller different is that once he had mastered that sound, he then started changing things around. Now, he also stumbled upon a very happy accident with a trumpet player who split his lip, and he had to give the trumpet part to his lead clarinet player. And now his lead clarinet player is playing the lead trumpet part, and suddenly he had this sound that nobody else had ever thought of. Not even Miller had thought of it. But here's the thing, once he realized this was really good, he carried on with it. And now Glenn Miller arrangements have that unique thing. They sound fantastic because they got that clarinet vibe in it. But I don't think he thought of that just spontaneously. Oh, just give it to the clarinet player. I don't think it was like that, because I think he was probably aware of a certain great band leader, clarinetist, who was also writing arrangements, and probably quite liked that sound. And so, you know, the happy accident of the trumpet player splitting his lip, you know, it was not spontaneous that he just said hand that onto the clarinet player. It was the combination of Miller's arranging style with that clarinet thing that made songs like you know, In the Mood just sound. I mean, In the Mood is a little bit more of a standard big band arrangement, but there are other songs of his, like Moonlight Serenade, where you hear that clarinet. That should have been a lead trumpet part. So once you know the rules, once you know the concepts, once you know what is standard that everybody does, start making it your own. Start doing your own thing with it. Because here's the thing, if you just go, I'm going to do away with all conventions, I'm not even going to bother to learn them, what are you going to run into? You're going to run into a brick wall. You're going to run into a brick wall because, you know, just creatively, because you have limited means, you have limited resources, you have limited understanding. But as soon as you start listening to other things and copying those other things, you bring those other ingredients into your sound, and then you make them your own. And now your sound is really unique. And now you can go forth and do really, really, really terrific things with your songs. So, yeah, that was that was more of a foretaste of lectures I give at universities when I'm doing lectures on songwriting and arranging, which is a course I used to teach. But there you go. There's a free sample for you folks. So I hope that kind of helped, actually. So we got 22 people here and 15 likes, which is awesome. Thank you very much. And people are actually pinging the little heart thing in the chat, which is great. Thank you very much for doing that. That is encouraging. So please do continue if you like doing that. Let's see. What else do we have here? Find it. Bob says, thank you. Find it interesting on how to use sounds to grab listeners' attention. Thanks to the chat too for chiming in. Yes, there's lots of really good examples there from the Cars and also from the Beatles as well. Ron Figueroa says, again, the Cars, hello again, intro, a cappella, harmonies have reversed echo effect along with the unaffected vocals. Yes, and also, of course, 10cc, I'm Not in Love. Listen to that song, because that is a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant song. Not just because it's really innovative with what they did, and believe me, they did lots of innovative stuff on that song. And, you know, I could ask my parents about that, because my mother is actually on that song. She is part of the wordless chorus that they made for that. And that's basically made out of tape loops, which they then set up on the mixer like a piano, so that they could play chords on the piano, on the mixer, basically by moving the faders. And that's how they did that. So there's lots of very, very cool techniques, arranging techniques, that are put into place in that song. Not least of which is, of course, the Fender Rhodes going through the Phase 90. That's very much there. And then there's the kick drum that goes all the way through. And it's the only percussive instrument that goes through that entire song. But guess what? It's not a kick drum. Basically, it's a note on a Moog that is very, very highly filtered, so that all you get is the very, very beginning of the transient of the note, and then it was played just on a keyboard on the Moog. So yeah, so if you want to learn how to use ear candy, and you want to learn the art of a really great arrangement, long form, that sounds so cosmic. That's the thing I love about that song, is it's really, really cosmic, but it's incredibly melancholic, especially when you hear the lyrics. And the cool thing about that song is, because of the wordless chorus, which, by the way, is not just my mother, it's my mother plus a layer. I think they did, the band members did 4 layers each, and then my mother did 4 layers. And then they blended them all together on the mixer, and that's how they created that wordless chorus. Now, the reason why they all sound a little bit warbled and a little bit weird is because they're all tape loops, and they were running live. And the tapes, let's just say, were not necessarily always in perfect tension. So that's why it sounds a wee bit warbly and a wee bit weird. And I don't think they're going through any ambient effects. I think what you hear is just it sounding weird. I think it might have gone through a plate reverb, but I think that's all they did with it, if memory serves. And it's, yes, Neil, it is a brilliant, breathtaking production, because that vocal is really, really emotional, and very exposed. But listen to that melody. The melody follows the voice leading of the Fender Rhodes part, especially in the verse. And it's just a brilliant example of a really, really, really great song that has stood the test of time. I mean, that song is like, what, nearly 50 years old? Can't be far off 50 years old, something like that. And it's a terrific song. It's brilliantly conceived, brilliantly written, and the production and the arranging is awesome. Yeah, fantastic song. Just Bob says, Chilly White My Girl, Gone, Gone, Gone is a great song that keeps you listening, starts a cappella, goes through several styles seamlessly, worth a listen. Yes. If you're into that kind of idea of different styles, kind of a song being kind of sellotaped together in a way that works, then yes, Steely Dan's Asia is a very fine example of that. Because if you listen to Becker and... Hang on a minute. What is that? Where did that come from? Was that my phone? Yeah, it was my phone. That was the Google Assistant. I don't know what the hell that was all about. But if you listen to Becker and Fagan talking about Asia, what's really cool about that is the way they tell the story of how that song came together is basically fragments of about 4 different songs that they sellotaped together. They stuck them together to make this little, Donald calls it a suite. And the cool thing about they had like the duet between Steve Gadd on drums and Wayne Shorter on tenor sax. That was all kind of a little bit accidental. They didn't really know what was gonna go in that section where you have the they didn't know what to put there. But they hired Wayne, who had been obviously in Weather Report, and before that had played with Miles Davis. And so they hired him to come and play tenor sax. And they didn't really have in mind to have a drum solo at the same time. That was actually the producer Gary Katz's suggestion, because I think Steve in rehearsal had just been playing time through that, and Gary had kind of said it needs a little bit more life, otherwise whatever comes on top of that may end up being exposed. At that point they didn't really know what was going to go there. So that's why Steve kind of like did his really explosive drum solo, and then they just put Wayne on top of that, and it sounds brilliant. And it's a pop song that has a drum and sax duet with a drum solo at the end of it. In the 1970s, that had never really been done. So there you go. Just Bob says 10cc was one of my favorite songs encapsulates what we're talking about. Yeah, I'm Not in Love really does encapsulate everything that we're talking about tonight. And it's a terrific song. 10cc are a great band, or at least they were a great band, and they were based out of the Manchester and Liverpool area of England. And at that time, my mother was in her 20s in Liverpool and in Manchester. And basically my parents worked the Liverpool and Manchester scene as session musicians, and that's how they made their living. They were in a couple of bands, they ran a couple of bands, but they were also pretty in demand on the session scene in London, Manchester, and Liverpool, which were basically the three centers for recordings in the 60s and 70s. So they played on a lot of records, and my mother sang on a lot of records, and pretty much never got credits, by the way. So, if you're going, oh great, I'm going to go and look at the credits list on that song, I'm Not in Love, you'll not see my mother's name on there because she was never credited. All she got was a session fee. And my dad was there because they had thought they might have an alto sax solo that might play in the outro of the song. And in the end, I think he even cut a couple of takes, and I think they ended up cutting it all together. So my dad's alto solo, nobody will ever hear it, even though it's there, or was there, even though it was recorded. It got cut, so nobody will ever hear that alto sax solo, sadly. All right, we've got 10 minutes left, and I got to tell you, this room is actually incredibly hot, which is why I'm wiping my forehead, because it is very, very humid. Ron Figueroa says Perpetual Chains by Yes has an interesting take on arranging. They play two different sections of the song at the same time in the middle. You know what? Duke Ellington actually did that way back, I think, in 1958 with a song, man, I'm trying to remember what it's called. I can't remember what it's called at the moment. But basically, what he did was he had two bands, and the idea was that the idea was to have two marching bands. And these two marching bands would play the same chart, but they would be out of earshot of each other, and then they would gradually move towards each other and then they would pass through each other and back out the other side. And I wish I could remember the name of that song, because it's just brilliant, where the two bands meet and they're not necessarily quite at the same part in the chart, but that's kind of deliberate. The music was written so that that accident would happen. And it's a great chart. And I don't know whether Yes actually had heard that. They might have done, possible. I know that a lot of rock musicians at that time and pop musicians at that time probably listened to a lot of jazz, I would think, as well. Neil says, are you the son of Kathy Redfern? No, I am not. I am not. My mother was not actually a member of 10cc. She was just a session singer. But she knew the guys in 10cc very well, because she did a lot of backups for them at different times. Either out live performing or in the studio, but mostly in the studio. She did a lot of studio work for them. So she knew them pretty well. She also knew the Beatles pretty well as well, because she worked with them back when they were known as the Quarrymen, before they became the Beatles, and they had Pete Best as their drummer. So my mother knew Pete Best very well, and through Pete she got to know the rest of the guys in Beatles, and she ended up playing at the Cavern Club with them when they were the Quarrymen, a soul band. And she did backups for them on, I think a few occasions, not just the one occasion. I think she sang backups for them several times, and so therefore she got to know them pretty well. And I think she was definitely an admirer of John Lennon's, but I think she maybe got on the best with Paul, from what she's told me anyway. Are you the son of Zor-El? Well, if I answered that question, I'd have to kill you, to be honest, because, that's kind of like a big secret. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything else. Yes. Not seeing anything else. But yeah, unfortunately, back in those days, bands like 10cc and other great bands from the 60s and 70s in the UK, they would hire a lot of session musicians who were really, really great musicians, and they never got credited. For example, in the Beatles are a case in point, and I've had this discussion with Jonny Gibe at length. There is talk of at least one Beatles song, I forget which record it is on, where it's not actually Ringo on drums. It's Bernard Purdie, the drummer that is credited with creating the Purdie Shuffle, which is used on Steely Dan's Babylon Sisters and a few other songs as well, like Home at Last from the Asia album. And Babylon Sisters as well. But yeah, he was on that record instead of Ringo, on at least one song. So yeah, but he's not credited on that record. You don't see Bernard Purdie's name on there. He would have just been paid the session fee, played the charts, and packed up and gone. But yeah, that was kind of what you did when you were a session musician back then. There was no legal requirement or musicians' union requirement to credit musicians on a record, unless they were actually contractually obligated to appear on the record. So if they were contractually obliged to be on the record, then they would get direct credits. But if not, and session musicians weren't, so they didn't get credited. So anytime you hear a lot of, George Martin's orchestral arrangements that he did for Beatles records, I don't think you ever see any of the musicians, the orchestral musicians, getting credited. It is what it is. Do I think backmasking is real? Can it be done? Yes, it can be done, and it is real. It does get done. It was definitely a thing that was done maybe from the middle to late 70s onwards, I think, into the 80s, and then there were bands that had heard of it being done, so they did it more deliberately in the 90s because they figured that there would be people out there that would be looking for it, and so they figured, if they figured out how to reverse the record, they would hear the reverse message. Yeah, it is something that is definitely done, and you can do it in a DAW. By the way, you just have to take a piece of audio and reverse it, and then saturate it and bury it, basically, and then it's there. Or write lyrics that can be reversed to say something else. So, and that takes a lot of linguistics skill. Neil says, according to Wikipedia, Eric Stewart tells a story that the secretary of the recording studio, Kathy Redfern, was asked to do the whispered "Big Boys Don't Cry" line in the "I'm Not in Love" recording. That is true. That is true. Yeah, that is absolutely true. That was in fact Kathy Redfern. But no, my mother was in the wordless backing vocals for that. And I think she might even have sung the very high "It's Because" line as well. She certainly did a take of that, and I think they layered that with one of the guys as well to thicken it up. But essentially, that "It's Because," that's her plus another bandmate, I think. But yeah, it's a great song because it's kind of minor, but it ends major, which is very cool. It's another little technique you guys can use. All right, we are at the top of the hour. Brett says that's why the Wrecking Crew and Motown musicians like the Funk Brothers lived in great obscurity. Yes, a lot of those great session musicians, of which Bernard Purdie was one, and one of the reasons why he kind of is now much more renowned is because he was prolific. He appears on, I think it is documented that Bernard Purdie has played on more than 1,200 albums by some 480 different artists. So he's probably one of the most recorded musicians in the history of recording at this point. But the reason why everybody knows who he is because of his sound. Because, when you hire Bernard Purdie, it's not just you're not just hiring a drummer to play a drum part. You are hiring his distinctive sound on the drum set. Same when you hire Steve Gadd. You don't just hire Steve Gadd to play a straight pop rhythm. He can do that, and he will do that, but you are hiring Steve Gadd because of the way he plays that straight pop rhythm and makes it sound. So, and it's the same with hiring my mother to sing backup vocals. You're hiring the way she sounds to contribute to your recording. Not that she does that anymore. She's very much retired. So anyway, there we go. That's the end of the show, folks. Thank you very much. Great questions, and that kind of turned into a really great topic about arranging and using recording techniques to kind of generate forward momentum of your song and to engage your listener and get them hooked in to your song right from the start all the way through to the end of your song. That's what the goal is. So use elements of your chorus. Sprinkle them liberally into your intro. Hint at the melody of what is yet to come. Set your listener up so that when they get to the chorus, they already know it. And then, even as they're hearing it for the first time, they're already able to sing along to your chorus. That's the goal. So with that, guys, we will leave it right there. Oh yes, I was going to address the Sunday versus Wednesday. I forget who it was who had asked. Let me go back and see. Dwayne says, have you thought of switching Songwriting Simplified days between Sunday and Wednesday? I have. It's just kind of maybe accidental that Songwriting Simplified was on a Wednesday, and no, it's not accidental. It kind of evolved that way. The reason why it evolved that way is because originally Songwriting Simplified was a show I did with Jonny Gibe every Wednesday on his channel. So it was a feature of his channel, not mine. I already had mine, which was Sunday Night Live. And so Sunday Night Live has been around for a very long time. There's like nearly 360 shows, I think it is now. We are seriously heading towards a big target for number of shows for Sunday Night Live. Sunday Night Live is pretty much a tradition as far as this channel is concerned, because I started that way back in 2017. So I don't really think I will move it ever, because it's Sunday Night Live. And so this show kind of evolved onto my channel because Jonny basically got to a point where he was just too busy and couldn't actually do the Wednesdays anymore. So I said, that's okay. I don't want this show to come to an end. So I will take it over and I will host it on my channel. And then when you're able to, if you happen to have a free Wednesday evening, let me know. And, I'll have you as a guest on my show, and it will just be like the old times again. And that invitation is still very much open to Jonny anytime he wants. All he has to do is just say, hey, can I come on the show tonight? And of course, he can do that. Totally. So this was originally a show that I started with Jonny. And we did that for maybe 3-4 years, and then it's been here for maybe about 18 months now. And so that's why it is kind of the way it is. And so I don't want to change my Sunday show, so then that leaves me with a Wednesday show that I don't know what to do with. So, yeah. That's kind of how it evolved. And I think I'm going to keep it that way. So with that, great questions, everybody. And I will see you all on Friday for the Studio One UK meetup at 8 p.m. I don't know why I'm slapping my mixer, but I'm slapping it. Poor thing. So yes, Friday, 8 p.m. UK time. Work that out for whatever time zone you are in. But for most of you guys in the United States, it's going to be kind of afternoon, Friday afternoon, probably. But as per normal, we will run way past the usual finish time, because it should be 8 until 10. But we will of course go well past 10 o'clock. I'm not going to try and set a new record, which by the way stands at 10.5 hours. Not going to do that. But it is tempting to do an 11-hour or 12-hour meetup. I maybe we'll save that for the summertime. But for right now, we will run late as per normal. So, if you want to come along a little bit later on, that's just fine. So, UK meetup, bring your Studio One questions. Think of features you would like to see in Studio One in future builds. Bring those ideas. Write them down if you have to. Bring those ideas. I would love to get them punted up to my colleagues and friends in Hamburg. So, yeah. Bring beers, bring wine, bring Studio One questions, bring feature requests. And we'll just have a darn good chat about using Studio One and making music. So, see you Friday, folks. And then, of course, Sunday Night Live on Sunday. Until then, folks, I bid you all a very good night. And it's piddling it down outside again. And it feels like we're definitely going to get part 2 of Thunder. So I am definitely shutting down. Good night, folks.